Hi, everybody. Welcome to Busy Living So Busy Living So Busy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. If this is your first time here, I'm so glad you're here. And if you're a regular, welcome back. Okay, I got to tell you guys, I've been asking Father Dan Reehil, our guest today, to come on my podcast. I think it's been for 8 months because we got back from Medjugorje 8 months ago. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I finally saw on Wednesday night, this past Wednesday night, I was watching YouTube, and because that's where I watch my news. Anybody who knows me, I do not watch anything on mainstream media. And I saw a promo that you were going on with Shan Ryan, which it aired yesterday. Amazing. Thank you for doing that. It was awesome.
He's an excellent interviewer because he's so open, he's so honest, and he's truly a truth seeker. And that's not always the case with a lot of people, particularly the broadcast news people. They have an opinion. They don't want to know what your opinion is. And they're just selling us their garbage, but he's really seeking truth. So I loved meeting him. I saw him again on Sunday. Great guy, wonderful person, great father, great husband.
He's amazing. So when that happened, you guys, I literally wrote to Father Dan right away. I'm like, are you going to come on my show? I'm so excited for you to do that you're on Sean, what will you do mine? And he actually called me and said yes. So those of you that are here today that don't know who Father Dan Reehil is, do you tell us who you are and your podcast, and tell us about your podcast?
Catholic priest for the Diocese of Nashville. I'm also the exorcist for that diocese. And you can listen to me. I'm also the director of Radio Maria USA and have a show on that radio network called Battle Ready with Father Dan Reehil, which you can listen to live 9 a.m. Central Time if you go to radiomaria.us or download the app for Radio Maria Play. And then you have 24 hours of Catholic programming around the clock. Masses, Holy Rosary, Divine Mercy, wonderful priests, great shows about all different parts of our Catholic faith. Father Mike O'Connor is on there. He's one of my favorite priests. I tune in to listen to him. So it's a really great little program. And then after it finishes, it dumps into the podcast world of wherever you find your podcast.
It's amazing. So I will tell you guys. So I go on this trip to Medjugorje. I had no idea, and I did a podcast about this back right when I came back from Medj, how I went. It was literally, my friend Amanda tells me that Mary wanted me to be there, and that's why I got invited by Anne, our friend Anne Vucek, who's actually coming on the show next week, which I'm so excited about. And we talk about the Vatican, what the Vatican they're ruling on Medjugorje, and which was amazing. And I'm so excited about that. But a little bit about my background with Father Dan. So I went on this pilgrimage. Father Dan was one of our leaders with Anne, and I had no idea. And for everybody who's out there, you know that I was not a practicing Catholic for about 30 years. And I go on this pilgrimage, and I'm the only one. And we get on, and I was the only one on our trip that wasn't a practicing Catholic. Wasn't I on our pilgrimage?
Probably.
Yes, I was.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, I was. And everybody's on the bus doing the rosary. I still have my rosary that I do every day from Mo and her husband, Alfred. You remember them? They say hello, by the way. I talk to them all the time. And when I was on this trip, and so many things happened to me, like happened to you. And when you went there for the first time was 1989. Am I correct?
A little close, 98.
98. And you went, and you didn't, at this point in your life, you're like a kind of, I don't want to say you're a playa, but you're out there, and you were a banker in New York City, and you were very successful, and you lived one of those lives that we see on TV today that everybody wants to emulate, right?
I mean, you shouldn't want to emulate that life at all, but it was a good life, according to the world standards. Yeah. Divorced and pretty unhappy.
But you get invited to go to Medjugorje.
Yes.
And you think, why am I going here? I don't know if I want to go here. Were you questioning it? Because your mom had been there. And did you?
Actually, a friend said she was going, and she did not want to. She was just a little afraid because the war had recently ended, although it was over. But even when we went, there were still machine gun guys walking all over the place, even back then. So, it's not like here where we have total freedom. So I said, sure. And my thinking was, now I was renting a villa in Amalfi, Italy, just, you know, not too far away from this going there. And my logic was, it's right across the Adriatic. It must be the same kind of land, food, and wine. It'll be just like Italy. And of course, when you got there, you realize this is not like Italy. These people are still in the year 1900. What happened? They never advanced. I mean, literally, there was no telephone in any house. You had to go to the post office to make a phone call. And of course, this is kind of pre-cell phones too. So I was just like, I don't know what happened here, but these people never moved on. Like, there's no advancement of any sort of anything. I mean, it was very much a farming community, and people walked everywhere. They didn't really have cars. It was a few cars, and you could get a cab. But, right away, I was a little bit like, this isn't going to be for me.
And your life changed dramatically after that.
And it did.
So it was amazing. And I want to tell you guys, if you don't know what Medjugorje is, will you tell us what Medjugorje is?
So it's really like a little hamlet between these two mountains, village. Now you could call it a village, but, it has a lot more buildup in the last 40 years. But really, when it started, these apparitions started, it was just a little place nobody knew unless you grew up there. And unfortunately, Anne did grow up there. So the woman that's coming on next week can give you her perspective as one of the townspeople who went back for the summer and all this started happening. But very simple life. I would say kind of a hard life. They don't have any of the comforts we have here, but they're very happy people. And one day, Our Lady appeared to a few of the girls at the time were probably, I don't know, in their teens maybe. And the next day they went back, and there were 6 of them. And she appeared to the 6, you could call them young children, or young adults maybe, but they're still teenagers. And Yakov was probably 11 maybe. So he was fairly young. And she appeared to them every day since. And then once, there's 10 secrets she's given all these kids, and 3 of them have all 10. They only see her once a year. And then the other 3 see her every day until they get their final secret. And then when they all get the secrets, then the secrets will start unfolding. What will happen is she will let them, they already know the dates of when these things are going to happen. They've written them down, and they have them on a piece of paper that only they know the dates. So let's say November 5th is one of the dates. A week or 10, that would be too late, too early now. We have to go further. November 20th, 10 days before, she will tell the priest that's been designated to know the secret, and the priest will pray for a week, I think, and fast, and then he will release the secret to the world, to the news, which now probably has to go through the Vatican, because the Vatican has these new rules about putting out messages. So, not sure how that's going to work, but then the world will know before it happens. And then when the event happens, they'll know that this is truly coming from heaven.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have to tell you, as again, a layman person who was there on this trip, and I will never forget us being on the bus and Anne telling us the story. And I can't remember which visionary she was with. She had been out, and she had been with him, and she had been translating for him. When this gentleman was with Mary and was at a point that Mary was visiting with him, and she's telling this story. Okay. So he comes down and he sees Mary, and, Mary, and he's like looking behind Mary, and he sees other people, and I get chills right away. And again, because I'm a layman person and I don't always believe everything, I'm like, wait a minute. What are you talking about? Wait a minute. What do you mean? Like, let's really describe what this means when Mary comes down, because people are like, what is this magic? What is this going on? And I literally sat there dumbfounded. I'm like, walk me through this. And so will you walk us through this? Because what does this mean? Because so many people don't believe that
Okay, well,
Mary
you
could
don't have
really.
to. I don't tell people you have to believe. If you don't want to believe, you don't have to. This is public revelation, private revelation, public revelation of the scriptures that you do have to believe as Catholic. But private revelation, we have no obligation to believe, although when God or his saints or angels appear to mankind with messages from heaven, it might be smart to listen up. So that's my advice to people. If you don't want to take it, you don't have to. But clearly, there's a reason they're giving us this information. I would say because we're living in very dark and desperate times, and they're trying to help us. Has it happened before? Of course. So let's look back through history. Roughly 400 years ago, Guadalupe, Mexico, she appeared to Juan Diego, and then had the miracle of the tilma for the bishop there. In Lourdes, France, she appeared to Bernadette. In Fatima, to the three children. And these are all documented, witnessed by the church, approved by the church. Of course, in Fatima, she did the miracle of the sun. There was 80,000 people showed up and witnessed this sun hurling towards the earth and then coming back. So it's not unusual. She's done it before, you know. And if you actually go in and research, she's appeared in many, many, many countries all around the world. Even in America, she appeared to a little girl named Adele up in Wisconsin. And so we have an approved Marian apparition in the United States.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's an amazing story because she was telling Adele she wanted her primary mission to be to educate children in the faith because the children are not learning about their faith. And then remember the Great Chicago Fire?
Yes.
The cinders from that fire went over the lake, one of the Great Lakes, and came to Wisconsin and set a huge blaze foot that was heading towards this little church, its property. And the flames were something like, 400 feet high. We were talking about literally a giant tsunami of fire, and it was burning over 2,000 degrees and just consuming everything in its path. And it was coming towards the church. A lot of the people decided they were going to run down to the lake, and they figured if I'm right in the lake, it will be protected, but the lake boiled and they were all boiled to death. Adele said, no, we're to stay in the church and pray the rosary. That's what instructions she was given from heaven. And the people that stayed in the church prayed the rosary through the whole night. In the morning, they went out, and there was a priest with them. And the priest described it as looking at literally the fence line of the property, and inside was he described it as like a field of green, like on a golf course, like a putting hole of green surrounded by gray ash for miles. And the outside of the fence was scorched and the inside of the fence was untouched. So an enormous miracle that you cannot explain. Many people died who did not stay in the church. Today you can go visit this shrine. I've been there.
It is
Our Lady of Champion, Wisconsin.
Champion, Wisconsin. When Anne told that story and I had the vision I want to believe. So I'm like a sponge, like, give me more, give me
Yeah.
more. And I feel like a lot more people today than ever before. I don't know if ever before, but like today, I feel like more people, at least a lot of people, are becoming more like sponges like myself. And we want to know. And when the visionary said that there were people behind him in heaven, that just gave me a sense of such peace to know that there is heaven and that everybody go. If you are a good person, I guess you go. Do only Catholics go to heaven?
No, but everybody in heaven is Catholic.
Really?
Well, yeah, because even if you're a Muslim or a Jew, you're only getting in because of Jesus. And when you approach the gates of heaven and look inside and you see the Trinity on the throne, and then you realize Mary is actually immaculately conceived and the angels are real and all the saints are there, you're actually, it's not faith anymore. Now you're seeing it. And so you have to believe what you're actually seeing. And to come into that belief, you're now accepting all the tenets of the Catholic faith, and therefore you'll be Catholic. And I think maybe even my own crazy opinion, maybe those who were not baptized, Peter has a big dunk tank at the entrance where he's baptizing people to get them through the door. I don't know how it works, but the great thing for what I take away from all these NDEs, these near-death experiences of people who've been there, they never want to come back. But they come
No.
back if Jesus asks them to come back. They go, but they go begrudgingly. And these are people who have children and grandchildren, and they're like, no, I don't want to come back. I want to stay here. But they go back, and they get to tell us, no, it's like nothing we could imagine. It's so much greater.
I mean, and you talked about in Shan Ryan's podcast that, at the end of your life, you want to be somebody that's like, not, I want to say, maybe excited to go to heaven, but definitely.
Yes. Why wouldn't you be?
I mean, I'm excited. I have so many people that I've lost, and so I know so many other humans that have lost so many of their loved ones that they can't wait to go and be with them.
Yeah. And you mentioned being a good person. Being a good person is a good thing, but that's not really what Jesus said gets you to heaven. He said, follow me. I am the way. Only him. He's the way. So if anybody's in heaven, it's through Jesus. And I would say, if you never got to know him by pure ignorance, let's say you lived in the middle of Tanzania and there's no church within hundreds of miles and you just never heard about him, God will provide for that too. He can do things we can't imagine. But if you know about Jesus and you willfully reject him and you willfully say, I want nothing to do with you, and your whole life you live for yourself, well, at the end of your life, it's going to be really hard to suddenly switch gears and go, okay, now I want to be with you in heaven. He's going to go, yeah, I don't know you because you've never given me even a nod in my direction. But if you have a conversion at your deathbed and say, I'm sorry, I realize I wasted my life. I desperately want to be saved. He will still save you. If you have a breath to speak, you can be saved. But don't wait till the end. You can begin today because we have a week till this election, and then who knows what happens on day 8. Because both sides seem to be rearing up for a big battle if it doesn't turn out the way they expect. And I don't even know how that's going to play out in this country. Would there be an uprising on one side or the other? Who knows? But if it gets to the point with total civil unrest and then martial law, and then people start taking out their guns, you better be on the right side of the fence. If you don't know if you're going to make it through the day. And none of us knows if we're going to make it through the day. I had a meeting with my bishop about a month ago, or maybe a little longer. We meet once a year private, just one-on-one near your birthday. And he said to me, do you have a doctor? And I said, no. He goes, well, we're the same age, so I can tell you that you need a doctor. And I'm telling you, as your bishop, you have to go and find a doctor and go to the doctor and get a checkup. I haven't been to the doctor in 9 years. I don't have a doctor. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So I go into the doctor. He takes my blood pressure 7 times on my both arms, both legs, back on both arms. And he looks at me and goes, well, your blood pressure is high. I go, how high is it? And he goes, 220 over 120. And I go, is that bad? He goes, you're beyond stroke level, like terrible. Had I not went to the doctor, I wouldn't have even known. I didn't feel good, but I didn't know why. I thought it was just because I was getting older. So I went on the medicine. Of course, it took it right down, and I feel like 100% better. But had I continued on that path, I could be dead today. Who knows? You just don't know.
And see, don't you think that maybe that bishop got a little whisper maybe from God that said, can you talk him into going to go get a doctor, please?
Maybe,
Can
but
you
I think he tells it to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he asks everybody if they have a doctor. Because typically priests don't take the best care of themselves because we live alone usually. You grab a burger here or a sandwich there. we're not making like 3-course meals with 2 sides of vegetables and a salad. It's never that way. So he's right. We should have somebody monitoring our health. But, so now I am.
So now you are. Now, wait, November 5th is not only election day, but it's a big day, an anniversary for you from
Yeah.
November 5th, 2000. And what was that? What is your anniversary for that
That
day?
was the day that Jesus called me to be a priest.
Isn't
And I
that
heard him say,
crazy?
come follow me. And so that'll be my 24th anniversary of him calling me to be a priest.
Isn't that amazing? And
Yeah.
what you've seen in the past 24 years, what has it been like to be a priest the past 24 years?
Well, I've only been a priest 10 years.
So what has it been like
It
the
took
past
me
10
all
years?
that time to get ordained. Well, it went by pretty quick. I think the biggest thing confession is one of my favorite things because people literally are reborn in the confessional. Like they come out just completely starting over fresh and clean, having their soul completely made right with God. It's a great gift. So the longest one I had was like 76 years. Somebody said my last confession was 76 years ago when I made my first confession. And I was like, wow, like that's 76 years. That's a long time. And they said, yep. And, just imagine the difference for that person. But the other thing is the culture has shifted in just 10 years, even. It's really gone downhill quite a bit. All these new things that we're dealing with 10 years ago, really, some of them weren't even on the horizon yet. A lot of the weird stuff that's being pushed. And I think my biggest fear, and it's not an unhealthy fear, but it's like my biggest concern is for the children. Because if you're a kid in these days, you're growing up with all this stuff happening around us, and this is their only snapshot. They don't realize that all this is brand new, that you pick your own gender, all this other stuff. I worry that they may be easily misled, particularly if they have access to devices and iPads and all that sort of thing. And the world's message is completely contradictory to Jesus's message. But the world has a million avenues to get to those kids. And there's not that many ways for Jesus to get to those kids. If they go to church, they're getting a 15-minute homily once a week. And oftentimes the homilies aren't that great. If their parents go to church, maybe the parents pray grace before dinner, but usually not. So like, if you're getting 99% of your information from the world, and the devil, I would say, and then 1% from Jesus, like those aren't good statistics. They can still pull through by the grace of God, but we have to do better at giving them truth, and not the big adult truths of life, but just basic truth. I think if parents started praying the rosary when the baby's conceived in the womb, the kids will never know the rosary's not a normal thing to do until they go on their first sleepover when they're like 15. They realize not everybody's doing this every day like us. And then the other thing is to like bless your children before you send them out into the world. Put a little holy water on your thumb, make the sign of the cross on their forehead, bless them, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So they realize that's a very important thing to do. And then they also have a special protection as you send them out. But all these little things, put a crucifix over their bed in their bedroom, blessed by a priest. And all these little things can make a huge difference in the long run, because there's always a ripple effect to all of our actions in life. Today, if you were at Mass, it's the gospel is the parable of the mustard seed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little tiny seed like the size of a poppy seed that then produces a 20-foot bush, which can be a home to many of the animals and birds and all this. And I don't think we realize that at the end of our life, when we stand before God, there's a judgment. I think some people know that, not everybody, but most, I would hope, who are baptized. But it's not just what we did or didn't do, good and bad. It's also the ripple effects they had on other people. So if you did something that then rippled out and created a horrible scenario for many, many people, it's all of those sins that they did because of you that also kind of go back to you. And conversely, the good thing, like Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
they sinned. We all got stuck with original sin because of what they did. We're still dealing with it in 2024. Your baby gets born and it has original sin because of their action. Big ripple effect. But we have the ripple effect too. And I think if we would just consider, we don't really see what goes on behind the veil between heaven and earth, but our actions have consequences that go beyond the veil and into many generations, perhaps, of people. So you just never know.
It's really interesting, I think, because I was raised Catholic, so I had to go to church every Sunday. My family, we always went to church. And then fast forward in my last son in 99, and during that time was when all the priests, it was coming out that the priests were and I know that happened to you as well, and I'm sorry about that, by the way. And it scared me. So, like a lot of Catholics, we left the Catholic Church, went to a different kind of denomination. Like I went to the Episcopal Church, which I call Catholic Light. And, there's even an acronym for people, Fallen Away Roman Catholics. And I think, why did that happen? Why did that happen? Because so many people were just left with a bad taste in their mouth. So many people haven't gone back that I wish could have had the opportunity like I did to go to Medjugorje, where it's like, this feeling came over me that there was no other way for me but to go back. But so many people have been lost. And that's one question. Why did that have to happen? And number two, when and why are there so many subsets of Christianity and Methodist,
1,000 Christian denominations in America.
30,000?
Huh? Yeah. Well, okay, I'll answer the second question first. So why usually somebody doesn't like something? Let's go to the original, Luther. He has a problem, and his problem was legitimate. There was a big problem in the clergy, and he decided it'd be better to start over with a new church than fix the problem because it seemed insurmountable to him. And the problem was real. What he had spotted as a big problem was a big problem. But he started his own church and then broke away because he didn't like something he saw. But you don't get to do that. That's not the model Jesus set up. It's to fix the problem and go forward. And then somebody didn't like what those people were doing, and they broke away. Most recently here in Nashville, about 8 years ago, we had outgrown our Catholic center, which is the home for the bishop and his offices, the tribunal, all those things, chancery. And there happened to be a big property over by Opryland called Two Baptist Church. They broadcast out on the TV. They had an enormous studio. Their church seats like 3,000 people. And there was an infighting in the church over something. The pastor wanted to go one way and the other leadership wanted to go that way. So half the people left the church. They suddenly realized they couldn't pay their bills or their mortgage, and they had to put it up for sale. So we came in and said, I don't know what we bought it for, but it was, pennies on the dollar. And we bought it from them because of the division that caused them to break and splinter into two different churches, which they had to downsize. But that's why it's happening, is because people just disagree and then decide we'll start our own church. So to all of you people out there that email me, leave me messages weekly, I would say, that the Catholic Church is evil, blah, blah, blah. Look, the Catholic Church has made many mistakes in 2,000 years. Yes, so has every other institution, including universities, hospitals, you name it. If there's a business, law firms, everybody makes mistakes. God didn't say the church would be perfect. He said he would stay with it till the end. But the Catholic Church was founded by Jesus Christ, and those 12 men he chose went out to the ends of the earth and died for this church, were murdered for this church, all but one. John was not martyred, but he was placed in boiling oil and miraculously survived it. So when you talk about who founded your church, we're the only ones that can say Jesus. These other people can say, oh, Luther or Calvin or this guy or Grandma Moses or whoever. But that's not the original church. It's the Catholic Church. Now, with regard to the abuse, of course, because the Catholic Church is the true church and has the fullness of the truth of Jesus Christ, that's the primary target of Satan. I mean, he hates all humans, but he really hates the Catholic Church because that's where the body of Christ resides. And there's a constant battle going on. And if you don't have your armor on, you'll get taken down. And there were many priests in the last century or so who didn't have the armor on. They let themselves go and they caved to their depraved passions and went after children. Horrible, horrible crime. But in the last 25 years, they've made efforts to clean that up. And a lot of the new policies are very effective in weeding those guys out of the formation process. It's not perfect, but it's way better than it was. What I do tell people, though, is, did you know that the public school system in America has a rate of child sexual abuse that is 10 times higher than the Catholic Church? 10 times higher. And nobody pulls their kids out of school. No. So I think for a lot of Catholics, they were looking for an excuse, and that just fit the bill. And they said, you know what? I'm done. I'm out. Because you didn't pull your kids out of the school, but that's a higher risk than going to church. And by the way, when they come to church, they're usually with you. So you're with the kid. It's not like you're leaving them alone with the teacher, which you do every day. So I tell people, would you please just think logically through this? Like, if you're going to hold the church accountable to that degree, then you really have to hold everybody else accountable to the same degree. But that's not what happened. And I'm not in any way condoning it. I think it's a horrible thing that I condemn. But it's much higher in the public schools. In fact, California, I think it's something like over 20% of the kids are abused. It's insane. It's like 1 out of 5. And this is a California study that published it, the school system. So, there's other work to be done.
For sure. I mean, I have somebody that a dear friend who went to the public school with her little ones, and her son was wearing like a Hurley shirt, like one of those surf shirts, and had rainbow colors on it. And the kindergarten teacher said, "Isn't that great gay pride? I'm so happy for you." The mother was like, "What are you talking about? He just wore a rainbow shirt." And that's your first assumption in the public schools, which then they soon after pulled their kids out and sent them to Catholic school.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have to be careful because the people that suffer from same-sex attraction, they feel abandoned by not just society, but particularly the church. We haven't done the best job of welcoming them and giving them avenues of how to live a chaste life, which is actually, we live celibate, the priests, and you can do it because we do it. I mean, most of us are doing it, I would assume. And, you're living actually the way that Jesus lived. He lived a celibate life. Mary lived a celibate life, even though she was married to Joseph. So it can be done. And there's even a joy in offering this back to God as his private gift we give him so he can use us in a way that saves more souls. I mean, I understand when somebody says to me, Father, the church won't let me get married to another man. And I'm like, yeah, I do know that. That's true, because marriage is a sacrament to bring forth new life. It's not just the new life between the couple and Jesus, but it's also oftentimes results in the new life of a new person. So we have to be open to the new life. But two men, you can't bring forth a new life. And when you explain it to them, it makes sense up here, but it still leaves them a little lacking in their heart because they feel like, well, can I never be in love then? Well, I didn't say that, but it's a whole other, that's a whole show in itself, which I'm not going to go down that road. But if you are somebody with this inclination, there's a program called Courage, which is a Catholic program to lift up, support, help same-sex attraction live lives that are fulfilled, purpose-driven, and happy as a celibate person with this attraction. So it has been done, and there's a lot of good videos on that website for people who went down the road seeking pleasure and gratification through the body. And ultimately, they wound up feeling very despairing and lonely, because oftentimes those relationships are not fully committed to each other. There's a lot, especially with the men. There seems to be a lot of like cruising and just hooking up. And I'm not saying, and I'm not trying to offend anybody, believe me, but I have friends who tell me they're gay. That's part of the lifestyle, is that constant, looking for a new person. And yet some of them said they found love and they're in a committed relationship. Great. But can you be in a committed relationship without the sexuality? Can you live like brother and brother, or sister and sister? Because that then would actually be a way to fully participate in the sacraments in a relationship with somebody that you could call your best friend, and you may live on the same roof, but you're being celibate. And that would actually work. But anyway,
so many people have said to me, well, Elizabeth, it's so unnatural what the priests are doing. God doesn't want anybody to just not have sex. Everybody needs to have love, and everybody needs to have a companion. So it's not natural.
it's supernatural. That's what it is. So they're kind of right. Jesus did it. He's God. He's supernatural. And he calls the priest to do it too. And by the way, this can be changed. Priests can be married, and priests can have babies. We know that the first pope had a wife because we know he had a mother-in-law. So Peter was a married man. She could have been dead, but we don't know. But we know that he at least had a wife at one point. And then in the first few centuries of the church, it was permitted for the priest to have a wife, one only. If she died, you couldn't remarry, and you had to be married before you were ordained. Once you're ordained, you can't take a wife. And this went on. Even bishops were married in the early centuries. So that can be changed back. The problem is it's a very divided lifestyle in terms of where do you put your attention. Because as a parent and a spouse, it's a full-time job raising a family,
For sure.
And then now imagine that you're getting phone calls in the middle of the night to run to the hospital, or this one's dying, or you have to go here, or, we don't just have one service a week like a lot of the Protestants. We have Mass every day. I have confession every day. I have benediction every day. I have adoration every day. So my day is full. Then I have my spiritual direction appointments. I have appointments for people that need counseling. I have marriage preparation appointments. It goes on and on and on. And so, I would be squeezing in time for the family at the end of the day, maybe an hour or two. Is that really fair to a family? I mean, I know it's done. There are businessmen that do the same thing, and the kids don't even know them. But that's certainly not what God wants as an example from a priest. But it is done. There's a very good priest, I think, in South Carolina named Father, what's his name? Dwight Longnecker, who was, I believe, Episcopalian. I'm not perfect on that, but I think so. And was married and had kids, and then realized he came to understand in his own heart that the Catholic Church is the true church. So he petitioned to become Catholic. He became Catholic, and then he petitioned the church to become a priest, since he already was a priest for that, whoever he was with. And they approved it. So he is a Catholic priest who has a wife and kids, which freaks people out. Imagine your priest talking about in his homily, well, last night, I got into a spat with my wife, and they're like, what?
But you've been married. And I remember when I was in Medjugorje and I said, well, you've been on a date before, haven't you? And you looked at me with 10 heads. You're like, Elizabeth, you think I've only been on one date in my life?
Yeah, but because she didn't want children, that marriage was annulled, which means it never actually was actual marriage. So technically, yes, I was married by the law, but according to God's eyes, never married.
And you use the word courageous. And I think it's really funny because I'm really open about my religion. I'm really open about my politics. Obviously, I'm wearing red, and this is going on the day before, hopefully President Trump is going to be elected as president, our next president, the 47th president of the United States. And people keep saying to me, "You're so courageous, Elizabeth. You're so courageous for coming out there and speaking your truth." And I'm like, I don't think that's courageous at all. I think going and fighting in a war might be courageous. I do. I think what you do with exorcisms is pretty courageous. I think it would be really hard. I know God deemed you to do this job, and he said, "I know you're up for it. So, Father Dan, this is what I want you to do for me," and you're doing it. But I don't think speaking our truths on what we believe to be right today is courageous. Do you?
It can be in certain countries where they'll kill you. That's a real thing. The most martyrs in the history of the church happened in the last century. People don't realize that from the year 33 to 1900, if you add all those martyrs up, that's less than 1900 to 2000. So that one century had more martyrs than the whole 1900 years before it, because the attack is greater than it was even in those early days. So you can die for your faith in many countries around the world. Not quite here yet, but I say yet, because they do have a hatred for Catholics in this country. We saw it. We know it. The CIA are targeting Orthodox Catholics as the terrorists. Are you kidding me? So it could happen. It could happen. But the other thing I want to correct, if I may, is I don't like that term, your truth, because that implies you can have whatever truth you want. I don't like that word. When we are being courageous, we're promoting the truth.
Okay.
It's the truth. There's only one truth in any situation. It's that which is in accord with reality is the truth. When Jesus came again, he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the light." So he's capital T truth incarnate. And so when I find people that go, "Well, that's not my truth," I go, "I'm sorry, there's only one truth in any set of circumstances. So you can't just make up your own truth. That would be delusional."
So right now we're living in a world
That
since
is
Joe
delusional.
Biden that is totally delusional. And I believe that
Yes.
110%. There's only two sexes. I've given birth to both of them. One was a girl and one was a boy, two boys. And to think that since Joe Biden and since this woke agenda has been brought onto our country, I feel like we are living, for me personally, I feel like I'm living in a world where 2 + 2 does not equal 4 anymore.
Well, in many ways, that's true, because people just espousing random thoughts of literally craziness. It doesn't resonate with many people. The flyover states are very confused by all of this nonsense that's being promoted. But they kind of discredit us as being unimportant and not relevant. Well, I'm sorry, we're still people and we still vote. So we'll see how it goes 1 week from today. But again, even these people that are living out these delusional ideas, and we still have to love them, and part of love is telling the truth with love, with charity, in a way that they can understand why we believe what we believe. If you went back even, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago, both sides of the aisle could sit down and have a conversation without yelling and just discuss their beliefs. Ronald Reagan, all these guys, they could do that. They could go, they ran tough elections, but they were civil. There was a lot of civility. Both sides right now have very little. A lot of
Where does that come from?
I don't know. To me, it seems childish.
Yes.
The sign of an adult is somebody who can disseminate their point of opinion without getting angry or worked up about it. Like, that's an adult. That's a mature person. You know who can't do that? Children. When they don't get their way, they scream and cry and, shake their hands, and they have a temper tantrum. That's what we're kind of seeing a lot of in today's world. And I'm like, come on, people, we need to grow up if we're going to have any hope for the future, because the children are learning this behavior. Well, it comes natural to a child. They have tantrums the way they're wired as kids, but then they never grow out of it. And then they're being affirmed in it as teenagers and in young adults. And then they go on to have another generation of just not fully formed individuals. And that's just, it's very sad that we can't just discuss anymore what we think and why we think it. And there are groups that can do this. I have a few friends at my church here, men's groups, where they sit with other denominations and they have prayer meeting every week in the morning, and everybody gets along, even though all the beliefs are a little bit different. But the common belief is Jesus is God and we need to serve him and move forward. And of course, that's going to maybe not fly with the Jews or the Muslims, but even in those arenas, when we're bringing in other faiths, I know you can still talk to people civilly and have a conversation and even have a meal and enjoy it. And it's not going to make people nuts to just talk about what they believe, you know? So hopefully at some point we'll have a leader that can bring everybody back to the table and say, look, somebody said it recently. I forget what it was, but he said we need to go back to the tenets and the faith that this country was founded on. If you read the founding documents of America, God is all through them. I mean, all through them. And today, it's a bad word in some circles to even mention Jesus' name. You know, it's like crazy. So, I mean, we have to do better. If not for us, for the kids, we have to do better.
Well, and I think it's so crazy that we live in a world where it's more important to know what Kim Kardashian is doing, Beyonce being with the presidential candidate, than it is to know about God and what day is today? What is it? Is today a special Saints Day? St. Jude's Day was yesterday. And where we are in our world today, it's so backwards. It's like everything is about outside, outside, outside. I got to look prettier. I've got to have bigger lips. I got to have bigger this. I got to have bigger that, the best clothes, the best handbags, all this material stuff. But nothing is about like community. And people are dying for community. And that's what you find when you go to church. Community.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, sometimes the church can be a chilly group too. I've been to churches where I'm like, wow, it's no surprise very few people are becoming Catholic, because I think the number one reason people, not number one, but there's a large quotient of why people don't become Catholic is because they've met nasty Catholics who've, soured them or turned them off. And that can go for any other denomination as well. But if we could just be more generous with our spirit and our heart with people, and just try to meet them where they are, and then, walk with them in their journey. Sometimes just being compassionate and kind towards somebody has a profound effect on them when they're like, wow, that, it's like the story of the parable Jesus tells about the Good Samaritan. The priest walked by and left the dying man, so did the Levite Jew. But then the Samaritan, who was considered an outcast, he's the one that took care of him, and that probably left a huge impression on that. It was a parable, so it's not a real story. But his point is, sometimes it's not the people you would expect to do the right thing. It's oftentimes maybe the underdog or the guy that nobody has any 2 cents about. He's not the shining example. He's the guy that nobody likes, but he does the right thing. We need to be doing the right thing.
And I feel like, why is our families falling apart? Why is there so much estrangement today, do you think, in the world in families?
Well, because, look, family time is not a priority. It's the bottom line. If something's important to you, you make it a priority. So I know in certain homes, my brother is one of them. The other problem is the sporting. All these kids' sports, they go for hours after school. They come in, 6, 7 at night. You can't hold dinner to 8 o'clock at night for young kids. They have to eat, 6 o'clock. They have to eat. They got to go to bed by 7:38. But these sports go on and on and on. But there has to be time for the family, because the family is important. It's the domestic church. And you got to carve it out. Sundays are supposed to be for God and family. But for a lot of people, Sunday is, go to the mall, go shopping, It's not family. It's everything else. So you have to choose what's going to be important to me. You know, a lot of people work in two jobs. The dad and mom work two jobs because they're trying to keep up with all the things that have to be paid for. But, when I was a little boy, we had one car. My dad took it to the firehouse, and then my mom pushed the carriage with my little brother, and we would go to the park about 4 blocks away. We'd walk. She'd pack a lunch in a brown bag. We'd eat the peanut butter and jelly sandwich at the park, and then we'd walk home at the end of the day. Life was simple, but we were together. Today, these stupid things, this thing is destroying everybody.
Oh, I agree. 100%.
Because I see even people at restaurants, 4 people at a table, and they're all looking at their phone instead of talking to each other. And I'm like, why did you go out together? And I even hear people go, instead of calling kids down to dinner from upstairs, they just text them. It's time for dinner on the phone because they know they're looking at the phone and that probably have earbuds and so they're not going to hear if I scream up. So people have to text their kids to come down to dinner. We're way off the mark right now. And I was talking to this with Doug Barry and Father Heilman. When God's people strayed so far that there's just too many souls walking directly into the arms of the devil, he would send a chastisement to get their attention. And chastisement to bring people back to God is actually a great work of mercy. Because the fastest way to get people's attention is to take away their toys. You know this with kids. The minute you take away the toy, now you have the kid's attention. It works for grown-up kids too. So do not get mad at God if suddenly we our toys start get taken away. I always say, follow the example of Jonah. Repent, turn back to God, and then he stops the chastisement. But for those who will not repent or pay attention to God, he allows, and it's really not him even. When we reject God, we come out from his umbrella of protection and we walk away from him. And now you're fair game for the devil. And you better watch your back because he's coming. So if you start to see things go south, we deserve it. Look at this country, look at the values that we're promoting. We're trying to take away God's lane. Assigning gender is a God thing, not a human thing. Determining when life begins and ends is a God thing, not a human thing. So when we keep trying to steal away God's thunder, eventually God's going to say, let me just show you who I am. You want to see power? I'll show you power. And it's not in an angry way. It's in a way so we realize who he is. He protects. He provides. He's the one who opens the door to heaven. We have to stop pretending we're God. That's very offensive to God to say we're God.
I don't even know why I would want to be God. I know that when I was getting sober and there's a step 3 in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is turn your will and your life over to the care of God. And that was so hard for me for a very long time, especially with young kids. But now I have to trust him, especially with the results of this election, because I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning many times in the last couple of weeks, couple of months, waking up my husband going, where are we going to go? If she wins, where are we going to go? Because I'm so fearful. Because when a presidential candidate hears Jesus in a room, she says, oh, you're in the wrong place. You need to be at the other place. You shouldn't be here. So does that tell us right now? And I know that a Vatican diplomat who you told me prior to coming on that he doesn't really even count as a Catholic, the Catholic Church has denounced him, called Harris an infernal monster. I mean, we literally are in a time of dark in I think the dark and the light. I think it's God and the devil.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, as a Catholic priest, I'm not allowed to endorse a candidate, but I can talk to issues. So the issue of faith is the greatest issue any human being can have because the scriptures tell us it is impossible to please God without faith. He could have said without love. He could have said without whatever. He said without faith. And we know this from all the miracles Jesus did. He was most impressed by people's great faith including the centurion soldier who was not a Jew. And when people had little faith, it also greatly impressed him in a negative way how little faith they had. So if somebody's going to attack faith as a national leader, that to me doesn't fly. If someone's going to attack life, that issue is preeminent to me because you don't have any other rights if you don't have your life. You can't, let's see, if you're dead, you can't pick your gender. If you're dead, you can't decide, what school you're going to. You can't decide what kind of housing you're going to be in. You have no options if you're dead. And it's very interesting that they use words that completely twist and confound the actuality of what they're saying. A woman's reproductive rights. It sounds like something nice. This is going to help me have a family. No, it's the right to kill your baby. All these little terminologies they've come up with, they all actually mean the exact opposite of what they do. And it's a manipulation of the word. It's lying, basically. Who's the father of lies? Satan. Who is the word? Jesus. So when you twist the word or words, you're stabbing at the heart of what the truth of God's message is. Which is why lying is a very dangerous sin, because I want to forget what saint said this, but they said when we lie, Satan goes before God and mocks him, saying, they claim to be one of yours, but they work for me. Imagine that. Well, horrible.
But I feel like there's so much goodness coming too. Like Tucker Carlson's been a lifelong Episcopalian. He's like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm becoming a Catholic. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so
I didn't
incredible.
know
Yeah, so Tucker Carlson just said that. I just saw him with Russell Brand, who's also, and John Rich. I just saw them down here in Sunrise.
Yeah, well, in the prologue of St. John, it says the light shines in the darkness and the darkness will not overcome it. Remember that. It will not overcome it. It can go very dark, but it will never overcome it. And, for those who are baptized, Jesus said he was the light of the world, but then at one point he flipped that and said, you are the light of the world because you're now going to represent me. You're going out into the world and you're going to shine my light into that darkness. So that's what we have to be doing. I think when people see somebody who's literally there are saints walking among us. I mean, we've all met them. Most of us have met them. Mother Teresa, John Paul II. When you're in the presence of these kind of luminaries, and I call them luminaries because they literally glowed with the glory of God, you can feel the holiness coming off them, just like you can feel the evil off a possessed person. And we're all called to that. It's not just, these big shots that, rose up to be popes and founders of orders. We're all called to do that.
It's just, and people don't, and I'm going to tell you guys, I did not really believe in the darkness until I saw it in Medjugorje, and it happened with somebody on our pilgrimage, and it wasn't even that bad from what everybody was telling me, including Anne and you, and I was like, oh, and the darkness is really there, and it scared me so much, and people don't realize how many different portals there are. I mean, you went on on your interview with Shan Ryan about the Ouija board. And nobody's talking about yoga as much as they were in Medjugorje. I mean, I remember, and I can't remember what's the priest's name, who was the head of the Indian man, that the Indian
Father
priest,
Leon.
Father Leon was talking about yoga. And before I got there, I had no idea. And I came back here because I was practicing yoga all the time. And no one had said to me, oh, by the way, this is an opening for darkness. Why isn't that out there on the waves? Why aren't people hearing that all the time?
Be honest, this is one of those things like Halloween that a lot of people don't want to hear. And when they hear it, it annoys them because they don't want to change. So the truth of the matter is that yoga comes from a religion that is pluralistic, having many gods, which means pagan, basically. They're worshiping all these different gods, but we know there's only one God. So who are they actually worshiping? They're demons. And all those little poses are like the bat signal we send up for Batman. That pose is a bat signal for that demon, and this pose is a bat signal for that demon. So you may be just doing your little poses, your downward dogs and all this, but that's bat signals going out to all those demons saying, oh, here, this one's calling you, come over. Just like when I make the sign of the cross, I'm invoking the Trinity, and the Trinity knows that. It's not like a mystery. So, and then people say, well, there's thousands and millions of people who do yoga and hardly anybody's possessed. Yes, but maybe that's not the goal of yoga. Maybe the goal of yoga is to people to walk away from their faith after a few years. Maybe it's to damage their relationships with something else. I don't know. I think Harry Potter had a huge effect on marching kids away from the profound truth of the gospel because they're all caught up in all this magic, thinking there's good magic. There's no good magic. All magic is evil.
Oh my gosh. And it is in
But these
Halloween.
things make people nuts. I get to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'll let you know what the truth is, and then you can do what you want with it. But I'm not going to have an argument with you. It's not worth my time.
No.
It's not. And if you notice, Jesus really never got into arguments either. He just proclaimed the truth. They would say, let's go kill him, and he'd walk away, go to the next. And I think over time, though, maybe those seeds will permeate, if there's any grace. And the way the grace comes is by having sacrifice for these people. If we will fast for these people, if we will do penances for these people. That was the message of Fatima. Imagine 3 little kids, 7, 9, and 10, who are fasting and praying and doing major penances so that people don't go to hell. That was the message of heaven. We want you to do this. Now, heaven's calling children to do that. Certainly we should be doing it. We're grown-ups.
So if somebody's out there right now and they're listening and they're about to go vote tomorrow, because I'm airing this next on Monday, and they're sitting here and they're very scared about what could happen Tuesday and a week from today. And what do you say can you give them some words? Can you tell them some prayers? Can you give them some advice on how to go about?
Well, listen, Jesus didn't promise us life would be easy. He only promised it would be worth it because eternal life is everything. And it's exponentially greater than anything in this life. So if your candidate didn't win, there's not much we can do about it. What are you going to do? I would say consecrate yourself to the Sacred Heart and Immaculate Heart of Jesus and your family. I would put up in your home, you should have your crucifixes on the walls that are blessed. You should have an enthronement of the Sacred Immaculate Heart in your home. There's promises that come with these things for protection, most importantly, protecting your place in heaven. And God provides always. People don't realize he still multiplies food. He still can make a way where there's a dead end. So put your trust in him, not in the election. And then whatever happens, you just say, all right, Lord, let's go now. And we begin this new period with whatever comes, but I'm walking with my arms linked up to you. Wherever we're going, it's going to be me and Jesus going into this next day. Many people don't know this, but in the Second World War, when we dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima, it was right where the bomb was almost dead center. There was a Jesuit house of religious priests, and they happened to be praying the Rosary. And the bomb went off and obliterated, literally incinerated into ash for, miles out of the blast. A terrible tragedy. But that house was untouched in the very center. When they came out and opened the door to see what happened, because there was, of course, the enormous explosion, everything was gone. And just their little rectory was standing. And they were all fine. And you know what? They lived to be old men. Nobody got cancer. Nobody was affected by radiation. Nothing. God can do anything. So the worst thing you can do is worry, because that kind of sends a message to God that I don't trust you can take care of me. And that's completely false. You can have a natural fear of walking out, you open your door, there's a bear on your porch. You're like, oh, I'm frightened. But to have long lasting dread of the future is almost sinful because we're the message we're sending to Jesus. I don't think you can take care of me. This is too big for you. You never want to do that. The more we believe, the more he can do for us.
All right, I want to end with this. So I keep having this vision that God is right above us, fighting with the devil and saying, I'm going to win, so you better just stop it. Do you think that's happening?
Well, he's already won. He conquered the devil on the cross and gave us back new life and opened heaven. So now the work to be done is really, it's more of a battle between Michael and his angels against Satan and his demons. And they influence. The original influencer is not Kim Kardashian, it's Lucifer. Lucifer was the first influencer who influenced Eve to take the fruit,
Right.
which was a lie. And he continues to influence people. You know, the devil doesn't have permission to kill somebody directly, but he can influence somebody to go kill another person indirect. And so he can influence our thoughts, and he can also inflame our passions to get us all worked up about something that we really wouldn't be worked up about normally. So be on guard. Thank your guardian angel every day. Ask the Holy Spirit to cover you with his protection and to lead you and guide you and inspire you where you need to go and be and what you need to do. You'll always be on the right path.
Love that. Love that. I have like 5 million other questions to ask you, but I know it's your day off, so I'm going to let you go. But
Thank you.
I want you to come back sometime and talk about Medjugorje because I
So-
know, but I really wanted to get this out before the election because this is so important, and I am just praying. And I do want to ask you, do you think God saved Donald Trump when that bullet came and he turned his head so ever so slightly to go look at that chart? I mean, literally, it was a hairpin away from literally blowing his head off.
I don't believe in coincidences at all. I think
Neither do
everything
I.
is a God incidence and things happen for a reason. But I actually think it was Our Lady because that was the 13th of the month, which happens to be Fatima Day. And it was also the day of Rosa Mystica. Under that title, that was the feast day that day. So much like John Paul II,
Yeah.
when he got shot, said it was Our Lady that moved the bullet. I feel like she did it again for Trump. It's just my opinion. I'm just saying.
I love
Let me
that.
give you my blessing. May
All right.
Almighty God bless you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Have a
Thank
great
you
day.
so much. You have a great day. Talk to you soon, I hope. Take care. Bye.